Good morning. Welcome to First Parish, a welcoming Unitarian Universalist congregation, open and affirming of all people. We're glad to see everyone here today, whether you've been coming for decades or are visiting for the first time. I'm Emily Cherry, one of the worship associates. Worship today is led by our guest minister, Reverend Joanna Lubkin. Rev. Jo currently serves as the Unitarian Universalist chaplain at Wellesley College, the program assistant for the UU Ministers Association, and as an affiliated community minister at Arlington Street Church in Boston. Today, you might feel as though something or someone is missing in the sanctuary. That's because our children and families are in Pierce Hall this morning, participating in a workshop led by our DEEP consultants, which focuses on building awareness about race and racism. And now I'd like to invite Steve Pratt-Otto, one of our 2019 Canvas co-chairs, for an update. Steve.
Thank you, Emily. Good morning, I'm Steve Pratt-Otto. I'm co-chair of the Canvas this year. Today is the end of Canvas Month in terms of our formal calling on people. We've had a very robust and successful campaign. I will be at a table and coffee hour. If you haven't made a pledge this morning, I'd love it if you stopped by, either to talk to me about a pledge or honestly to ask me any question that you might think of in terms of the church's finances or our Canvas. And for those of you who've pledged, you've been very, very generous, and we're really grateful. We have a good start to being able to put up a budget for next year, thanks to your generosity. Thank you.
Thanks, Steve.
Thanks, Emily.
So after the service, everyone is invited to join in our coffee hour in Lyon Chapel, which is through this door. This is when we visit and get to know one another better, so welcome. Ann Dinsmore of the Welcoming Committee invites you to join her for conversation on the couches in the Peterson Room, which is right next to Lyon Chapel. Whoever you are, whatever your gifts or abilities may be, however you identify your gender or sexual orientation, wherever your life and faith journey has taken you, you are welcome here. Welcome to one and all.
Good morning. I'm so delighted to be with you all, especially having been here recently to celebrate Reverend Lisa's installation with you all. So it's just wonderful to be with you. We call ourselves and one another to worship with these words by Angela Herrera. This is a prayer for a fresh, unremarkable morning. A prayer to bring us to attention before the steadiness of the world. Sun rises and sun sets, back and forth, like the rocking of your grandmother's chair. Like coming and going, rising and falling, droning and beating, like ancient music. And you, remarkable for your ordinariness within it, and your thinking about it, and your yearning for meaning. You, dependent, spun into the interdependent web confined to a body. You, independent, conscious, free, and so sometimes also lonely, but unconfined in spirit. This is a prayer for you, for your well-being, your peace, your deep peace, and for everyone you love and for their well-being, and for friends we haven't met yet, and for all of the strangers that we'll never meet, though we are closer to them than we think. All of us, in the arms of the earth, our mother, with her rocking and singing. Welcome to worship. And now I invite you to please rise as you are willing and able as we join in singing our opening hymn, number 1000, Morning Has Come.
At this time, I would like to invite Dan Brown and Emily Stubbs to come forward to light the chalice, symbol of our Unitarian Universalist faith the world over. As they light the chalice, please join me in our unison affirmation printed in your order of service, in English and then in Spanish. We give ourselves one unto another, covenanting to walk together as a congregation, promising faithfully to watch over one another and to delight for love to abide in our midst. Nos entregamos y nos comprometemos a caminar juntos como congregación, prometiendo con mucha fe cuidarnos mutuamente y deleitarnos en el amor que permanecerá entre nosotros. Each week, we also light 2 candles of peace, each candle representing a different place on earth that we want to lift up and remember this morning as a sacred encounter with the world. There are untold numbers of places on earth that need peace. Today, we remember 2 places that we especially hold close in this service and throughout the week ahead. After each of the candles is lit, we will speak 3 words for peace in English, Arabic, and Hebrew: peace, salam, shalom. Our first candle is lit for Brunei, a small country in Southeast Asia that is on track to quickly enforce a new death penalty for same-sex activity. Peace, salam, shalom. Our second candle is lit for Chicago, Illinois, where Lori Lightfoot has recently been elected to serve as the city's mayor, being the first Black woman and the first openly gay person to hold the position. Peace, salam, shalom.
I invite you to join me in a time of prayer and meditation, followed by some sacred silence. Our prayer today is by Anne Mason. Spirit of life, your very presence among us is what gives us connection. Help us to sense that beneath our feet is the strength we need to keep us grounded. Help us to feel that behind our backs is the protection we need to feel safe facing our fears. Help us to know that before our eyes lies the beauty we seek to feel astounded. Help us to lift our heads high enough to be aware of the vastness of our sky and of our spirit. And help us to know that within our hearts lies the love we need to complete the circle of connection in our life. We're grateful, Spirit of love, for this day. May we use all of these gifts, our feet, our backs, our eyes, our heads, and our hearts, to bring love into this hurting world, this world which we so value, which we cherish. Please join me in a time of silence.
The following reading by D.H. Lawrence is titled Cool, Unlying Life. When we get out of the glass bottles of our own ego, and when we escape like squirrels turning in the cages of our personality and get into the forests again, we shall shiver with cold and fright, but things will happen to us so that we don't know ourselves. Cool, unlying life will rush in, and passion will make our bodies taut with power. We shall stamp our feet with a new power, and old things will fall down. We shall laugh, and institutions will curl up like burnt paper. The offering will now be gratefully received. If you are visiting First Parish for the first time today, please feel free to let the basket pass you by. We are so happy that you're with us.
For all that you have given and for all that we have received, we give thanks. Our second reading is by Mark Bellatini, called Tehillah, the Hebrew word for prayer. Baruch atah emet. Blessed are you, O truth. Like the fabled Moses, I too can never claim to have seen you face to face. Too often I have hung my own face on you and pretended that I know something that I do not. Indeed, my most honest heart confesses that at most, I have only caught the briefest glimpse of you at the very edge of my eye, and only when I get out of my own way, my own rush, my own fury. I sense your cool shadow on me when I grow hot from the tears I've been holding back, or when I notice the sadness or whimsy hiding in the silent eyes of those around me. I sense your closeness when I gaze at a star suddenly unveiled by a toreador cloud, or catch an early yellowness in the leaves of the oak. It's then that I feel a brush of wings nearby, and I realize that I am only a small part of it all. Then I know that I am not the great high power of the world, but only a puff of breath hidden amid the mighty blasts of the great whirlwind called the universe. Like a lacewing barely floating on the tip of a small blade of grass is my life. From beginning to end, a short footnote in the vast essay of stars and space unbounded. An essay neither signed nor finally symbolic. And yet, this truth, your truth, is no sadness, but a joy. No lack, but a blessing, like the sight of a child at play, totally absorbed in the moment and glad. Blessed are you, O truth, who plays in the silence, like a child in the waves of an infinite sea. Baruch atah emet. I invite you to please rise as you're willing and able, as we join our voices in our hymn of preparation, number 21, For the Beauty of the Earth. have a piece of art on my wall that keeps stopping me in my tracks. I got it at General Assembly a few years ago, and it features a quote from Augustine of Hippo, the 5th century Christian theologian. It says, "Hope has two beautiful daughters, anger and courage. Anger at the way things are, and courage to see that they do not remain as they are." Over the past couple years, I have turned to that quote so many times to help me find or keep hope. And I do a little internal inventory. Anger at the way things are? Check. Courage to see that they do not remain as they are? I hope so. We cultivate that together in our spiritual communities, our resolve renewed to make the world a better place. While I love and am inspired by this quote, I think Augustine is missing something, all due respect. It seems to me that fueling our hope on anger and courage alone is a quick path to burnout. I would add awe to remember why it's all worth it. Awe, that sense of wonder that we feel in the presence of something vast that transcends our understanding of the world. The 20th century Jewish theologian, Rabbi Abraham Joshua Heschel, calls it radical amazement, a term that always captures my imagination. I just love it. And Heschel wrote that our religious traditions offer us a legacy of wonder. The surest way to suppress our ability to understand the meaning of the divine, he says, is to take things for granted. Indifference to the sublime wonder of living is the root of sin. Heschel continues, as civilization advances, the sense of wonder declines. Such decline is an alarming symptom of our state of mind. Humanity will not perish for want of information, but only for want of appreciation. The beginning of our happiness lies in the understanding that life without wonder is not worth living. He concludes, what we lack is not a will to believe, but a will to wonder. I can vouch for this anecdotally, as I imagine most of us can. And in fact, when I started getting too bogged down in the words and the overthinking while writing this very sermon, it occurred to me to practice what I was preaching. I looked at a tattoo that I have on my arm of song lyrics by Zoe Toby, and they say, "Walk in awe more than you run." Right. I bundled up in warm layers and went outside to lay in a hammock and look up at some pine trees. It took a few minutes for my thoughts to shift from, it is important that I write this sermon because I need to have something to say on Sunday, to the question of, what is most important to me about sharing a sermon with my spiritual family? My thoughts shifted into the realm of delight and purpose, and pretty soon I was barely thinking at all, just present. Moving outside from that task-oriented rhythm of our day is a first step. The second is turning our attention to the world around us just as it is with appreciation. Awe and wonder can be tapped into in a moment. Ralph Waldo Emerson wrote an essay called Nature in 1836, which sparked the Transcendentalist movement. In it, Emerson wrote this of finding awe in conditions that seem less than ideal. He said, "In the presence of nature, a wild delight runs through me, in spite of real sorrow. Not in the sun or the summer alone, but every hour and every season yields its tribute of delight. For every hour and change corresponds to and authorizes a different state of mind. From breathless noon to grimmest midnight, crossing a bare common in snow puddles, at twilight under a clouded sky, without having any thought in my mind of special good fortune, I have enjoyed a perfect exhilaration." Awe and wonder are pleasant experiences, but they do more than serve as individual enrichment. Thank goodness. Because it turns out that awe affects not just us, but how we are with others. Dr. Paul Piff is a professor of psychology and social behavior at UC Irvine. In 2015, he published a paper called, I love this, Awe, the Small Self, and Pro-Social Behavior. I looked it up. Pro-social, it's like the opposite of antisocial. Piff and his fellow researchers were exploring how awe affects people, and here's what they found. Piff writes, "Our investigation indicates that awe, although often fleeting and hard to describe, serves a vital social function. By diminishing the emphasis on the individual self, awe may encourage people to forego strict self-interest to improve the welfare of others. When experiencing awe, you might not, egocentrically speaking, feel like you're at the center of the world anymore. By shifting our attention toward larger entities and diminishing the emphasis on the individual self, we reasoned that awe would trigger tendencies to contribute to the world in positive and helpful ways." Gotta love social science writing. He goes on to say that awe can arise at any moment. Looking up at the starry expanse of the night sky, or that. Gazing across the blue vastness of an ocean, feeling amazed at the birth and development of a child, protesting at a political rally, or watching a favorite sports team live. Many of the experiences that people cherish the most are triggers of the emotion we focused on here, awe. Piff concluded, "Across all of these different elicitors of awe, we found the same sorts of effects. People felt smaller, less self-important, and were kinder and more generous. Might awe cause people to become more invested in the greater good, giving more to charity, volunteering to help others, or doing more to lessen their impact on the environment? Our research," Piff concludes, "would suggest that the answer is yes." In a world where the news so often elicits Augustine's anger at the way things are, we need awe to see and appreciate the things around us that are not, totally terrible. Radical amazement shifts us to the realm of gratitude, turning our attention to wonder and purpose. Moments of awe and wonder help us sustain that courage to create the world that we'd love to see. When we're young, awe and wonder are our natural states. As we get used to the world around us working pretty much the way we expect it to work, wonder can be dampened by inattentiveness. Thank God we can shift back to awe at any time. Courtney Martin is a columnist for the blog On Being, and she wrote about her experience of reuniting with awe with her toddler Maya. Courtney's blog post is a little bit on the longer side, but it is so on point and just so delightful. I'm excited to share it. So Courtney Martin writes, "My daughter is on the brink of everything, and I'm learning so much from watching her about being proud, about noticing, about all of the senses that I take for granted. She was in the bathtub the other day, splashing around, when all of a sudden she froze, brought one tiny pointer finger to her lips, and said, 'Dog.' Amid all of the urban chaos, she heard her very favorite creature, a dog, making itself known. She makes me feel like I'm probably only accessing about a quarter of the sensory experiences available to me on a regular basis. I'm also learning about awe," she writes. "The other day, I brought her over to this obscenely beautiful jasmine vine that has grown bushy and fragrant near our mailboxes. I picked her up and we put our noses right up to the petite white flowers and took in the scent. Then I set her down and she walked over to a jade plant that some neighbors and I had recently migrated to a bigger pot. She leans over and she takes a big, satisfied whiff. Jade plants are, of course, many things, but they're not fragrant. And yet, if you had seen her there, neck craned, eyes closed, you would have assumed that she was smelling the most potent thing in the world. And maybe she doesn't really get what smell is yet, but after I let out a surprised giggle, I realized that there is something so moving about a little human smelling a jade plant. She has no reason not to expect it to smell wonderful. She has no reason not to expect everything to be wonderful." Courtney continues, "Part of becoming an adult is sometimes learning how to lower your expectations of your loved ones, of yourself, of particularly charged moments like your wedding day, New Year's Eve, that long-awaited vacation. And there's wisdom in that. I am constantly working on my friend Arnold's advice to expect less and love more. And yet, the paradox is that there's something that sort of transcends maturity about being open to the potential pleasure of every single moment. Maya is free of specific expectations, so she approaches the world with only one giant, indiscriminate expectation: delight me. Keys go in mailboxes, and miniature doors open to reveal pieces of paper left inside, left by a friendly person in a funny outfit? Fascinating. Dominoes can be sorted into various sizes of beautifully colored baskets in whichever way I want. Sign me up. Lotion is a white substance that comes out of a metal tube and you can rub it on someone's hand and it disappears and then they feel soft? Holy moly. The mundane becomes miraculous through the eyes of my 16-month-old daughter. She's rarely disappointed, and when she is, she simply moves on to the next miracle, waiting in a kitchen drawer or nestled in the soil of the garden bed. And you know what? As she marvels, I'm marveling anew. Lotion is sort of amazing when you stop to think about it. The postal system does sort of knock my socks off. And dominoes, they're so pleasing when you hold them in your hand, the cold weight of them, those little black indented dots. We've discovered that they spin on the concrete floor and make a great noise when Papa propels them from his mouth across the room. Courtney concludes, "Before Maya was born, I once asked my spouse, John, what he was most excited about. And he surprised me by answering, 'I can't wait to take slow walks with her.' This is a guy who runs marathons and prides himself on responding to emails at lightning speed. He doesn't do slow. But he already knew that part of the gift of raising a child is rediscovering discovery, of reuniting with awe. So, my friends, Hope has 3 beautiful daughters. Anger at the way things are. Courage to see that they do not remain as they are. And awe to remind us of what matters. Humanity will not suffer for want of information, but only for want of appreciation. The beginning of our happiness lies in the understanding that life without wonder is not worth living. Moving outside from the task-oriented rhythm of our day is a first step. The second is turning our attention to the world around us just as it is, with appreciation. Awe and wonder can be tapped into in a moment. Let us see the miraculous in the mundane and approach each day with one indiscriminate expectation. Delight me. Amen. I invite you to rise once more in body or spirit as you're able, as we sing our closing hymn, number 1064, Blue Boat Home.
Please join me in our unison affirmation as Reverend Joe extinguishes the chalice. We extinguish the flame, and not the light of truth, the warmth of community, or the fire of commitment. These we carry with us and offer as gifts unto the world.
And I invite you to please take the hand or touch the elbow or shoulder of someone near you for the benediction. These are words from beat poet Lou Welch. Step out onto the planet. Draw a circle 100 feet around. Inside that circle are 300 things nobody understands, and maybe no one's ever really seen. How many can you find? Go in peace, make peace, be at peace. Amen.